In the sprawling community known as Oakleaf Terraces, there was a tradition that brought warmth to its otherwise nondescript corridors. A group of senior residents, mostly women, though an occasional husband or visiting grandchild might join, would gather in the wide hallway near the shared lounge every Wednesday afternoon. They brought knitting needles, patterns, thermoses of tea, and bundles of colorful yarn. It wasn't a formal club, but a loose circle of friends who found joy in crafting together. Their seating arrangement was simple: a few folding chairs and a small wooden table placed along the hallway wall, out of everyone's way. Most passers-by appreciated the homey sight of them chatting softly, counting stitches, and occasionally helping each other decipher complicated patterns. Every so often, a neighbor would linger to watch the bright balls of yarn spin across a lap, mesmerizing in their variety of hues. Yet, behind the seemingly welcoming facade of Oakleaf Terraces lay an undercurrent of tension. The local homeowners association, HOA, enforced rigorous guidelines, some might say too rigorous, about how common areas were used. Chair color, corridor width, decorative elements, and even the type of potted plants permissible were subject to official rules. Most residents tried to abide by them, albeit with some grumbling, hoping to maintain harmony. Still, the seniors' knitting circle had never caused actual complaints. At least, not until Brenda Arnett, commonly nicknamed Karen by exasperated neighbors, set her sights on them. Brenda was in her late 50s, with a coiffed hairstyle and a penchant for pastel sweaters buttoned up to the collar. She held an HOA board position, though few could recall how she'd originally attained it. Over time, her presence became synonymous with intrusive hallway inspections, endless violation notices, and an unwavering conviction that the entire community should follow her interpretation of the rules. For a while, the knitters existed outside her realm of focus. But that was all about to change, thanks to the mild success of their little circle and the slight way they rearranged chairs in the hallway to accommodate newcomers. They couldn't possibly guess how their simple pastime would trigger an outburst of unprecedented pettiness and cruelty. If you asked the knitters, none of them aspired to provoke trouble. They were, by and large, a gentle group. The unofficial leader was Teresa Grant, a retired schoolteacher who specialized in crocheting baby blankets. Next to her sat Olivia Pearson, known for her lace work and for crocheting delicate doilies to gift newlyweds. Mildred Millie Carter was the group's go-to expert for complicated cable knit sweaters, always patient with novices. Then there was Ellen Rossi, a talkative widow who had moved to Oakleaf Terraces after her husband's passing and found solace in the rhythmic motion of needles. A few times, men joined in. Robert Mills, for instance, occasionally crocheted hats for preemies at the local hospital, explaining he picked up the skill during a lengthy hospital stay years back. The group welcomed anyone. They listened to each other's stories of grandchildren, shared recipes, offered moral support in times of sickness, and traded anecdotes that spanned decades of life experience. They loved that particular spot in the hallway because it offered natural light from a large window near the lounge entrance. The overhead fluorescent lights in the lounge were too harsh for some, and the glare gave others headaches. So, the hallway's gentle daylight was perfect for seeing fine stitches without straining their eyes. And passers-by typically smiled at the cluster of chairs and the tinkling laughter that echoed there. Still, the knitters weren't blind to the strictness of the HOA. They kept their gatherings tidy, never leaving stray yarn or scraps behind. After each session, they folded their chairs and placed them against the wall so as not to obstruct foot traffic. Their small table was used only for teacups and baskets of yarn, easily moved if someone needed more space. They believed they were following the unspoken rules. Be courteous, be unobtrusive, and don't cause disruptions. But courtesy and unobtrusiveness would not suffice for Brenda Arnett. She insisted on absolute compliance with a vision that only she controlled. To her, the hallway was a space meant for pristine minimalism, not colorful gatherings. She bristled each time she passed, and heard them chuckling or saw bright yarn swirling around. And her frustration soon reached a boiling point. The first sign of impending trouble came in the form of a typed letter. Teresa Grant found it slipped under her door early one morning. The letterhead bore the HOA logo, and the text was every bit as stiff as the stationery. Dear Ms. Grant, it has come to our attention that you and a group of residents regularly occupy the hallway near the lounge with chairs, yarn, and other personal items. We remind you that common corridors are to remain clear of potential obstructions. Please ensure you are not in violation of HOA safety and aesthetic standards. Failure to comply may result in official penalties or fines. Best regards, B. Arnett, on behalf of Oakleaf Terraces HOA. Teresa's heart sank. She knew it was from Brenda, who had never personally approached them about any concerns. Teresa immediately shared the letter with her fellow knitters. Mild confusion followed. Weren't they allowed to sit in a hallway that was wide enough for wheelchair access and emergency movement? They'd never blocked a fire exit or forced others to detour. A few days later, another letter arrived, referencing the alleged excess of yarn and personal effects. This time, it included grainy smartphone photos of half-finished knitting projects on laps, obviously taken without the knitters noticing. The letter demanded they cease further clutter or hold their gatherings in private units. The group discussed possible solutions. Should they meet inside one of their apartments? But that would exclude members who had trouble navigating too many stairs or cramped interiors. Should they use the lounge exclusively? The overhead lights were harsh, and the lounge was often booked for events, meaning they might get shuffled out at short notice. In the end, they decided to stay put, but be even more careful about tidiness. They'd move the chairs slightly closer to the wall, keep yarn in zippered totes, and wait to see if Brenda escalated her complaints. The hope was that if they addressed her clutter concerns, she'd relent. Little did they know, Brenda's plan went beyond requests for neatness. She viewed their presence itself as a violation of her aesthetic domain. One Wednesday, as the knitters had just settled in, hooking loops of yarn and sipping tea from travel mugs, Brenda appeared around the corner. Dressed in a pastel blazer and dark slacks, she clutched a clipboard with a pen clipped to the top, her signature intimidation prop. She marched straight to Teresa Grant, ignoring the others. Ms. Grant, Brenda began, voice tight, I believe I've sent multiple warnings about using this hallway for personal activities. You are obstructing the thoroughfare, and it's unsightly. Teresa politely rose, steadying herself with her cane. We're not blocking anything, Ms. Arnett, she said gently. People can pass by easily. We've measured. There's enough room for a wheelchair. Brenda's eyes flicked to the others, who looked on with quiet unease. I see yarn scattered, chairs taking up space. This is not an approved lounge area. Why can't you do this inside your own units? Or use the official lounge? Millie Carter cleared her throat. The lounge lights bother some of us, and we love the natural sunlight here. No one's complained but you. Brenda sniffed. Well, I represent the community's best interests. If you can't abide by the guidelines, we'll have to impose official penalties. She tapped her clipboard. I'll be documenting everything. Ellen Rossi, normally chatty, found herself uncharacteristically tense. Is there a specific rule we're breaking? She asked. We check the guidelines. Corridors must remain passable, and we do that. Brenda's lips curled into a grim line. We have general stipulations regarding the use of common areas, and we maintain the right to enforce aesthetic standards. At that, she snapped a few photos with her phone, ignoring the knitter's obvious discomfort. Then she pivoted sharply on her heel and marched away, leaving the group anxious. Teresa murmured, Let's keep calm. We're doing nothing wrong. But the seeds of dread had been planted. Brenda's animosity was more than formal annoyance. It hinted at something personal, a sense of ownership she felt over the hallway's look. Despite Brenda's scrutiny, other residents voiced their support. Some who lived on the same floor regularly passed by and smiled at the knitters, occasionally stopping for a brief chat. A tall woman named Marcia often joked about how she'd love to learn knitting someday. A retired postal worker named James sometimes brought them coffee, praising the lively atmosphere they brought to an otherwise dull corridor. One evening, Calvin Liu, a neighbor who lived just across from the lounge, knocked on Teresa's door. He handed her a small petition he drafted. "We, the undersigned residents, have no objection to the senior knitting group gathering in the hallway. We believe they do not obstruct safety and bring a positive community spirit." Calvin had already gathered a dozen signatures, including several from the floor above who came down occasionally. Teresa teared up reading it. "Thank you. It means so much. We don't want to fight. We just want to knit." Calvin nodded, expressing that many found Brenda's vendetta ridiculous. Word spread, and more signatures were added. The petition, though unofficial, was a morale boost. The seniors felt they weren't alone facing Brenda's hostility. Yet they also knew from experience that broad, neighborly goodwill sometimes failed to sway the HOA's more dogmatic members. Brenda, in particular, thrived on technicalities. If she declared the hallway usage a violation, the board might side with her, or at least remain passive. The knitters hoped their petition would at least push the board to consider leniency. Weeks passed, and the knitting group carried on, albeit with heightened vigilance. They sat a little closer together, stored extra yarn in covered baskets, and tried not to linger in the corridor too late. Brenda watched them from time to time, making snide remarks about turning the hallway into a daycare for old ladies. The knitters swallowed their hurt, determined not to stoop to her level. Then came the day Brenda escalated matters by lodging an official nuisance complaint with the HOA. She cited unsightly clutter, potential tripping hazards, and excessive noise. The board scheduled a meeting to address it, inviting the knitters to attend and state their case. On a chilly Thursday evening, Teresa, Millie, Ellen, and Olivia went to the HOA meeting in the community room. Brenda sat on the board's panel, flanked by other members who looked vaguely uncomfortable. A small crowd of curious neighbors gathered to watch. Brenda read her complaint aloud. "These individuals occupy the corridor with large quantities of yarn, personal effects, and seating. They disrupt the aesthetic harmony and pose a risk for accidents. I recommend relocating them to a more appropriate location." Teresa cleared her throat, speaking gently but firmly. She explained that the group was small, tidy, and respectful. They caused no noise beyond soft conversation. Many neighbors, some in attendance, nodded in agreement, and Calvin even held up the petition. One board member, Ms. Jensen, seemed sympathetic, stating that as long as the corridor remained safely passable, she saw no major issue. Brenda, however, wasn't placated. She insisted the seniors should respect the building's design, implying that hallways were for walking, not loitering. Ultimately, the board chose a middle path. They issued no ban, but suggested the knitters remain vigilant about cleanliness and corridor width. Brenda glowered at the lukewarm resolution. She'd wanted a decisive condemnation, but instead got a polite shrug. When the meeting ended, the seniors felt relieved, albeit uneasy about Brenda's next move. They sensed her frustration had only grown. She wasn't one to give up easily, especially when she believed herself in the right. The day after the HOA meeting, Brenda's scowl deepened whenever she passed the knitting circle. She muttered under her breath about soft-hearted board members and lazy seniors. Some knitters overheard fragments, but they tried to let it go, focusing on their projects and each other's company. However, Brenda's animosity didn't abate. She ramped up intimidation tactics. On multiple mornings, the seniors found post-it notes plastered to the corridor walls, each bearing pointed reminders. "Keep this area free. And no permanent loitering. Hallway is not a playground." The notes were unsigned, but obviously from her. Though the hallway remained free of chairs outside the designated knitting times, Brenda insisted that the presence of any group was an eyesore. She told Ms. Peterson, a neighbor who occasionally chatted with the knitters, that watching them huddled there brought down property values. During one Sunday afternoon, the seniors weren't even knitting. Ellen and Olivia were simply chatting while waiting for the elevator. Brenda happened by and snapped a photo, muttering something about documentation. Even the elevator ride with her was tense. She refused to speak, her jaw set tight, as though sharing the small space with them was an intolerable burden. The seniors started feeling uneasy, even violated. Why should their simple hobby incite such animosity? They concluded that Brenda's motivations went beyond the rules. Perhaps she felt overshadowed by the group's popularity. Or maybe she resented any form of communal bonding she couldn't control. Regardless, it left them on edge, each day bracing for a new confrontation. Some neighbors grew worried that the situation might escalate. Calvin Liu confided in Teresa that Brenda had a history of petty vendettas. He recalled stories of residents who'd put up small holiday decorations in off-season times, only to have them mysteriously defaced. Another neighbor, Ms. Moore, told tales of how Brenda once campaigned to remove a child's wheelchair ramp from a shared stoop, claiming it clashed with the building's design. That battle ended only when the child's parents threatened legal action under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Learning these stories unsettled the knitters. If Brenda stooped so low as to sabotage a wheelchair ramp, what might she do to a group of seniors with yarn? Ellen, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. She can complain all she wants, but if the board's not backing her, how far can she really go? Yet the cautionary tales rang in everyone's ears. Brenda found ways to target people outside official channels. At the same time, new supporters emerged. A volunteer from a local community center, hearing about the Knitters group, dropped off several skeins of donated yarn. "We love that you folks are building fellowship here," she told Millie. "Hope these bright colors inspire new creations." The seniors accepted the donation with gratitude, carefully storing the yarn in a tote. They didn't want to flaunt it in the corridor and give Brenda fresh ammunition about piles of supplies. So, they decided to keep it in a corner of the lounge closet. Even so, the group suspected Brenda's watchful eye might soon notice the extra materials. Worry lurked beneath their usual camaraderie, an undercurrent of fear that overshadowed their beloved pastime. All the tension came to a head one sunny Wednesday. The knitters had just arrived, setting up 3 folding chairs near the window. Teresa unzipped a floral print bag containing multiple skeins of soft pastel yarn. Ellen had a small plastic bin with spools of thread for crocheting doilies. Millie spread out her knitting needles, while Olivia read a pattern for a complex lace scarf. They chatted, exchanging updates on medical appointments and discussing the arrival of a neighbor's grandchild. The conversation was calm, punctuated by the soft clack of needles. Early afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating the swirl of pastel yarn in each knitter's lap. Suddenly, the elevator dinged, and out stepped Brenda, face twisted in a look of pure contempt. She spotted the knitters, marched over, and for a moment simply glared. The seniors' cheerful banter faded into an uneasy hush. Without warning, Brenda spat. "I told you. This hallway is not your personal knitting club." She pulled a small plastic bottle from her bag, a bottle of ink, and before anyone could react, she uncapped it and flung dark, viscous fluid onto the senior's yarn supply. An audible gasp tore through the air. Ink splattered across pastel threads, staining them with dramatic streaks of black and navy. Teresa's eyes went wide in horror as droplets splashed on her pattern. Millie let out a shocked cry, trying to shield her project, but it was too late. The thick ink soaked into the delicate fibers, seeping into the hearts of the carefully wound skeins. "You have no right," Brenda screamed, voice tinged with mania. "Stop ruining the hallway scenery with your junk. You think you can just ignore the rules?" The seniors were too stunned to respond. They'd never imagined Brenda would resort to outright vandalism. A startled bystander, MS. Peterson rushed forward shouting, "What are you doing? Call security." Another neighbor ran to fetch help. Yet Brenda didn't linger. She spun on her heel, flung the empty ink bottle aside, and stormed down the corridor. The knitters were left speechless, tears brimming. Ink dripped onto the linoleum floor, forming a splattered mosaic of tragedy for their beloved pastime. For a moment, no one spoke. The seniors stared at the ruined yarn, hearts racing from the sudden violence of the act. Olivia gingerly picked up a skein that had once been pale pink, but was now marred by splotches of black. Her hands trembled. This costs so much, she whispered. How could she? Teresa looked near tears. She patted Olivia's arm gently. We'll clean up, somehow, she said, but her own voice quavered. Miss Peterson, who witnessed the scene, ran to get paper towels and water, hoping to prevent permanent staining on the floor. Another neighbor dialed the building's security desk. Soon, a security guard named Officer Bennett arrived. Concerned, he jotted down notes, took pictures of the damage, and asked if anyone was hurt. Though the seniors were uninjured physically, the emotional blow was significant. Their cherished yarn, which had come from personal savings, thoughtful gifts, or special community donations, lay in a ruined heap. Some projects were half finished, time and care gone to waste. Officer Bennett nodded sympathetically. I'll file a report, he assured. Is there a camera in this hallway? The group shook their heads. The building had cameras in the lobby and main entrances, but none in the lounge corridor. Still, we'll do what we can, he promised. As the chaos settled, Teresa and the others tried to gather the stained yarn into plastic bags. The corridor smelled of ink, sharp and chemical, overshadowing the usual comforting scent of tea and wool. Ms. Peterson helped mop up the floor. By the time the group finished cleaning, the hallway felt hollow, like the sense of joy once there had been shattered. News of the ink attack spread swiftly through Oakleaf Terraces. A wave of outrage erupted among residents who couldn't believe someone would stoop so low as to destroy seniors' personal property. Many openly called for Brenda's immediate removal from the HOA board. Others demanded legal action, insisting that assaulting personal belongings with ink constituted vandalism. The knitters found themselves in an emotional whirlwind. Some, like Olivia, were devastated by the loss of expensive yarn she'd been saving for special projects. Others, like Ellen, felt shaken by the sheer aggression of Brenda's act. Teresa tried to keep everyone calm, but her own voice broke when describing the incident. In the midst of the uproar, the HOA board announced an emergency session. The email sent to residents read, "We are aware of a serious incident involving a member of the HOA board and the senior knitting circle. The board will meet on Friday at 6 p.m. in the community hall to address the allegations and discuss appropriate measures." Meanwhile, Brenda was notably absent from the hallways. A few neighbors reported seeing her slip in and out of her unit at odd hours, perhaps trying to avoid confrontation. Some suspected she was meeting with a lawyer or drafting a defense, though what defense could justify such an act was anyone's guess. Teresa, Millie, and the rest of the knitters wondered if they should file a police report. Officer Bennett had told them they could press charges, as destroying property in a malicious act was certainly illegal. Yet the seniors, many of them conflict-averse, weren't sure how to proceed. They hoped the HOA or management would intervene swiftly and hold Brenda accountable. But if the internal process proved toothless, they might have no choice. Amid the shock and sorrow, neighbors rallied around the senior knitters. A small group led by Calvin Liu organized a yarn drive, inviting residents to donate skeins to replace what had been ruined. Posts popped up on the building's online forum, condemning Brenda's act and urging solidarity. Within days, the outpouring of generosity was staggering. Pastel wools, variegated cotton blends, acrylic yarns in every color, all arriving at Teresa's door or left in a box at the front desk labeled for our senior knitters. The donations were more than physical materials. They were a message. You are not alone. People wrote notes praising the knitters' kindness and expressing hope that they wouldn't stop their gatherings. Some included gift cards to local craft stores. A few parents said their children wanted to learn knitting from them, seeing them as role models. Touched by the support, the knitters met in Teresa's apartment to sort through the bounty. The living room quickly filled with bright yarn piles. While the memory of the ink-stained mess still stung, the seniors found renewed hope in the compassion of their community. "We can't let one hateful act drive us away from what we love," declared Millie, her voice trembling with passion. The others nodded in agreement. "Let's keep knitting. Let's show Brenda that her cruelty won't break us." Yet they still felt apprehensive about returning to the hallway. The sight of that corridor might trigger painful memories, and who knew if Brenda would strike again. Teresa wanted to wait for the emergency HOA meeting before deciding their next step. The seniors needed assurance that leadership would protect them from further harm. The community hall buzzed with tension on Friday evening. Folding chairs were arranged in rows, quickly filled by residents eager to witness the board's handling of Brenda's ink attack. At the front sat the HOA president, Linda Watkins, flanked by 4 board members. One seat remained conspicuously empty, Brenda's. Shortly before the meeting began, Brenda slipped in, taking her place with a stiff posture. Her face was set in a grim mask, eyes forward, avoiding the accusing glares from the audience. President Watkins tapped her gavel lightly. "We're here to address a grave incident involving Ms. Arnett and members of the senior knitting circle. According to multiple eyewitnesses, Ms. Arnett poured ink on the knitter's yarn, causing property damage." She paused, scanning the room. Teresa and her friend sat in the first row, expressions a mix of sadness and determination. Brenda remained impassive. One board member, Mr. Davis, asked Brenda directly, "Ms. Arnett, do you have any response to these allegations?" Brenda lifted her chin. "I was provoked. They consistently violated hallway usage policies, ignoring repeated warnings. My action was regrettable, but it was a moment of frustration. I did not intend permanent harm." A stunned murmur rippled through the crowd. Did she just justify the attack by calling it a moment of frustration? Teresa stood, her voice resonating with controlled emotion. "With respect, Ms. Arnett, you destroyed our yarn. You ruined personal belongings. We're seniors living on fixed incomes. This isn't minor damage." The board listened gravely. Another member, Ms. Huang, leaned forward. "Ms. Arnett, regardless of your frustrations, vandalism is unacceptable. We have to consider disciplinary measures." Brenda's face twisted. They refused to comply with corridor guidelines. The hallway's aesthetics were compromised, and they gave me no choice but to enforce standards. Outrage surged in the audience. Shouts of, "You had no right," and "That's assault," erupted. Linda Watkins banged the gavel to restore order. She addressed the room, acknowledging that formal consequences would be determined after hearing all parties. The meeting ended with the board promising a swift decision on sanctions against Brenda, while also reaffirming the seniors' right to gather if they followed basic safety measures. As the crowd dispersed, it was clear the majority sided with the knitters. Some argued the board should remove Brenda from her position. Others whispered about contacting the police, certain that a mere HOA censure wouldn't be enough. Brenda brushed past the seniors without a glance, marching toward the exit as an enraged hush fell behind her. Though the meeting ended without a final verdict, the seniors felt a measure of relief. The board publicly acknowledged Brenda's wrongdoing. The question remained, would they impose real consequences or simply offer a mild reprimand? Teresa and her circle returned to her apartment, discussing their options late into the evening. They weighed the possibility of pressing legal charges. Some wanted to. Others hesitated, wary of the stress and expense of a lawsuit. In the end, they decided to wait for the board's official ruling, but made it clear they wouldn't rule out further action. Meanwhile, the hallway outside the lounge stood empty. For days, the knitters avoided it, still haunted by the memory of dripping ink. The lounge, with its harsh lights, wasn't appealing either. They ended up gathering in each other's living rooms for the time being. It lacked the airy brightness they loved, but at least they felt safe. Support continued pouring in. One afternoon, a local journalist from a small newspaper arrived, having heard rumors of an HOA official vandalizing seniors' belongings. The knitters, though uncomfortable with publicity, agreed to share their story, hoping it might discourage further bullying. A brief article appeared a week later, titled, "Seniors Knitting Circle Faces Vandalism in Local Condo Dispute," raising eyebrows across town. Through it all, Brenda remained a looming figure of hostility. Neighbors reported seeing her slip into the management office with thick folders in hand, perhaps evidence or legal disclaimers. Rumors swirled that she was preparing a countersuit or threatened defamation claims if the knitters took her court. The tension rippled through Oakleaf terraces, overshadowing daily life. Amid the turmoil, an unexpected ray of hope arrived in the form of an email from the HOA board. They proposed a new idea, dedicating a small corner of the lounge exclusively for the seniors, equipping it with improved lighting and storage so they wouldn't have to use the hallway. The message read, "Given recent events, we wish to offer a permanent, comfortable solution for the knitting circle. We'll set up adjustable lamps and shelves for yarn. This space will be recognized as the official senior craft corner, ensuring you have a safe, well-lit environment for gatherings." The board clarified that using the corridor in large groups might still be discouraged, partly due to safety codes, but they wanted the knitters to have an appealing alternative. Teresa and the others were both touched and cautious. Was this an olive branch or an attempt to confine them out of sight? Yet the more they discussed it, the more it seemed like a beneficial compromise. They would have a recognized place to meet, one that wouldn't lead to conflicts with corridor rules. If the board truly improved the lighting and offered shelves for their materials, it could be even better than sitting in the hallway. They also appreciated the show of support, a clear pushback against Brenda's hostility. Maybe something good can come from this awful situation, Olivia mused. The others agreed. If the arrangement was genuine, it might not only solve the corridor dispute, but also ensure ongoing recognition of their group's value to the community. Of course, they still awaited the outcome of the disciplinary proceedings against Brenda, but at least they felt the board was on their side. Within days, the seniors began coordinating with the HOA to refine the lounge corner plan. A board member, Ms. Huang, personally visited Teresa's apartment to discuss lighting preferences. She asked about each knitter's needs. Did they prefer adjustable task lamps, overhead track lighting, soft warm bulbs, or bright, white ones for better contrast? Teresa appreciated the thoroughness. She pointed out that some older eyes needed warmer tones to avoid glare, while others liked daylight bulbs for seeing stitch details. Ms. Huang jotted notes, promising to find a balance. They also discussed storage. The seniors had plenty of yarn, especially after the donation drive. They needed shelves or cabinets to hold it safely, away from lounge traffic. Ms. Huang suggested a tall cabinet with lockable doors, so they could protect supplies when not in use. She also mentioned the possibility of adding a cozy rug and comfortable chairs. The knitters felt a pang of gratitude. It was a stark contrast to Brenda's hostility, a sign that the rest of the HOA valued them. Indeed, Ms. Huang apologized on behalf of the board, admitting that they should have found a constructive solution sooner. She also confided that many board members found Brenda's behavior outrageous, even if she had once been instrumental in strictly upholding the building's aesthetic. By the meeting's end, the seniors felt cautiously optimistic. They still wanted accountability for Brenda's vandalism, but at least the future of their knitting circle looked secure. Gathering in a dedicated craft area might even draw more residents who wanted to learn. A silver lining was emerging from the dark cloud of ink. The anticipation for the HOA's decision on Brenda's wrongdoing reached its peak. 2 weeks after the emergency session, the board scheduled another meeting to announce the outcome of their internal review. Rumors abounded. Some believed Brenda would be stripped of her HOA position. Others guessed she'd receive a slap on the wrist. The seniors arrived at the community hall with a mixture of nerves and resolve. The crowd was smaller this time, perhaps because the shock had worn off, but still included many curious neighbors. President Watkins opened by reading a prepared statement. After careful consideration and witness testimony regarding the incident on date, wherein Ms. Brenda Arnett poured ink on personal property belonging to several residents, the Oakleaf Terraces HOA board has decided the following. 1. Ms. Arnett will be formally censured by the board for conduct unbecoming a member of the HOA leadership. 2. She is relieved of her duties on any HOA committees effective immediately. 3. She is fined in accordance with the HOA bylaws for damaging resident property. In addition, she must reimburse the knitting group for the cost of the ruined yarn. 4. Should Ms. Arnett commit any further acts of harassment or vandalism, the board will recommend legal actions up to and including eviction procedures as allowed by state law. A wave of hushed excitement passed over the audience. Brenda, seated in the front row, looked as though she'd swallowed a lemon. Her face reddened and her lips tightened. Some neighbors clapped softly upon hearing the decision. Ms. Watkins continued, "We do not tolerate acts of aggression against residents. We hope this closure allows our community to heal and move forward positively." Brenda sprang from her seat, eyes flashing. "This is a witch hunt. I only tried to enforce rules." That silly group kept ignoring. "Ms. Arnett," Ms. Watkins cut in, "this decision is final. Any appeal must follow official procedures." With that, the meeting ended. Brenda stomped out, ignoring the scowling stares of onlookers. While she remained an owner in Oakleaf Terraces, her clout in the HOA was effectively gutted. Most felt it was the just outcome for such a shocking display of malice. The day the HOA installed the new craft corner was one of triumphant joy for the senior knitters. Workers arrived early to rearrange furniture, install better lighting fixtures, and assemble a tall cabinet with lockable doors. The walls near the designated spot were freshly painted in a warm, neutral hue that contrasted nicely with bright yarn. A soft rug was rolled out to reduce echo and provide a comfortable ambience. The seniors watched with smiles as Ms. Huang oversaw final touches. Chairs arrived, plush but firm enough for extended sitting. The group tested them, marveling at how cozy and supportive they felt compared to the old folding seats. The adjustable lamps offered both daylight and warm modes. Simple but thoughtful details, all catered to the seniors' preferences. A small sign mounted on the wall read, "Senior Knitters and Crafters Corner. All are welcome." The board had approved the wording to encourage others to join or at least admire the projects. More than just a nod of acceptance, it was a sign that the building now celebrated the knitting circle as a valuable part of community life. Teresa and her friends spent a morning transferring donated yarn, needles, patterns, and half-finished projects into the new space. They arranged the skeins by color on the shelves. Rainbow arcs of pink, blue, yellow, green, red, and purple. The once dreary lounge corner now burst with vibrancy. Millie joked that it felt like they'd stepped into a cheerful craft store. As they settled into their new seats for the first official session, cameras from local media arrived to snap pictures. The short news story that followed described how a once troubling incident had inspired a better solution, praising Oakleaf Terraces for turning conflict into an opportunity for creativity. The seniors laughed at the mention that their corner now had celebrity status. For them, the real victory was simply being able to knit in peace, with excellent lighting and a sense of belonging. Over the next few weeks, the knitting circle's routine adapted. They scheduled 2 or 3 meetups a week, sometimes adding a weekend session for those who had visiting grandchildren or busier schedules. The lounge's new corner felt like home, and passers-by would often pause to see what they were making. Some tried to guess patterns. Is that a baby blanket or shawl? Others marveled at the lace intricacy or the texture of cabled sweaters. Even better, the improved lighting allowed some knitters to tackle advanced projects they'd previously avoided, like intricate Farrell colorwork or crocheted doily sets. They'd hold up a piece in progress, exchanging tips and praising each other's skill. The sense of community thrived. Brenda, stripped of her board role and now mostly shunned, kept a low profile. She sometimes glared from across the lounge, but the seniors ignored her. Without her official standing, she had little power to interfere. A few neighbors said she was considering selling her unit, though no sign of that emerged yet. Meanwhile, the board stance sent a strong message that creativity and fellowship were welcome. The seniors felt a newfound respect from residents. Some younger folks asked if they could learn to knit scarves or hats, forging unlikely friendships across generations. In a sweet twist, a few men who'd never tried yarn craft started dropping by. Robert Mills, who crocheted hats for charity, set up a donation box for finished goods. The circle now made items for local shelters, blankets, warm hats, mittens, using the donated yarn. Their corner became a hub of quiet generosity, each stitch carrying hope for someone in need. One afternoon, about a month after the move to the lounge corner, Brenda approached Teresa with a stony expression. The knitters tensed, memories of spilled ink still vivid. But Brenda didn't raise her voice or carry anything threatening. She cleared her throat. I wanted to say, her gaze darted around, avoiding direct eye contact. I realized things went too far. I shouldn't have done what I did. Teresa, crocheting a pale green shawl, paused mid-stitch. She gently set her hook down. That's true, she said quietly, leaving room for Brenda to continue. Brenda exhaled sharply. I was frustrated. I felt you were ignoring the guidelines. But it doesn't excuse my actions. She seemed to choke on the words. So, I am sorry. The lounge fell silent. Millie bit her lip, not sure how to react. The apology, however grudging, was something. Teresa mustered a small, polite nod. We appreciate the apology. We also hope you realize how much distress you caused. Brenda's expression flickered. She gave a minimal nod. Yes, well, I'll let you be, she managed, then turned and walked away, leaving a hush behind. A few knitters exchanged uncertain glances. Ellen shrieked. At least she said it, she whispered. Might not fix the damage, but maybe it means she won't lash out again. Teresa agreed. Let's focus on the positive. She's no longer harassing us. That's enough. Though the apology felt incomplete, lacking any real warmth or sincerity, it might be the closest Brenda could manage. The seniors chose to accept it, not wanting to cling to bitterness. After all, they had found a better space and the unwavering support of the community. With the drama behind them, the knitting circle flourished. Word spread that the seniors had a dedicated lounge corner, and more residents of Oakleaf Terraces joined in, not all seniors. Younger mothers came to learn how to make baby socks. A college student who lived with her grandparents occasionally visited, showing them how to adapt patterns from modern online tutorials. The lounge corner became a testament to the building's evolving spirit. A small sign-up sheet let people note times they'd visit, so the area wouldn't get overcrowded. The seniors welcomed anyone, turning the circle into a multi-generational haven. Some days, a retiree with arthritic fingers would teach a brand-new crocheter how to hold a hook. On others, an elderly ex-tailor demonstrated advanced stitching methods gleaned from decades in the garment industry. Meanwhile, donated yarn continued to arrive, some from outside the building, as the story had circulated on social media. The knitters arranged an overflow stash in a locked closet for future community projects. Baby blankets for the local hospital, caps for a homeless shelter, even small comfort dolls for a children's charity. Each completed item carried a tag reading, "Handmade with care by Oakleaf Terraces Knitters," a symbol of how adversity had birthed a deeper purpose. It wasn't lost on them that if Brenda had never attacked them, they might have stayed in the corridor indefinitely, overshadowed and less organized. Her meltdown ironically upgraded their entire arrangement, granting them a more visible, better supported platform to share their craft and compassion with others. To celebrate the circle's success and the lounge corner's positive influence, the HOA board organized a small ceremony one Saturday morning. They invited local media, city council members, and building residents to see how a once contentious issue had turned into something uplifting. A short program was planned. Ms. Huang would speak about the lounge improvements, Teresa and Millie would share the knitting group story, and a representative from a local charity would thank the seniors for their handmade donations. The ceremony would end with a ribbon cutting of sorts, though in true knitter style, they planned to cut a knitted strand to symbolize the official opening of the craft corner. Teresa, somewhat shy, prepared a small speech. She recounted how the group started humbly in the hallway, drawn by natural light and camaraderie. She did not dwell on the ugly incident of ink throwing, merely mentioning obstacles that eventually led them to a better space. She concluded by praising the community's generosity and welcoming spirit. When Ms. Huang introduced her, a wave of applause filled the lounge. Teresa stepped forward, voice a little shaky but earnest. She spoke from the heart, finishing with, "We learned that no single malicious act can overshadow the kindness that binds a community. Our knitting circle stands as proof that adversity can lead to creativity, progress, and, above all, unity. They snipped a short knitted cord with scissors, applause echoing against the lounge walls. Cameras flashed. Smiles lit up the faces of seniors and guests alike. The joyful event reminded everyone that Oakleaf Terraces was more than a building run by a few strict rules. It was a place where neighbors could come together in warmth and common purpose. Brenda was conspicuously absent from the ceremony. Some assumed she stayed away out of pride or resentment. Yet late that afternoon, as Teresa tidied up the lounge corner, she spotted Brenda lingering in the doorway. Their eyes met for a moment. Teresa offered a small nod, acknowledging her presence. Brenda shifted awkwardly, looking at the neat rows of yarn and the crocheted bunting that decorated the new shelves. "This corner, it looks nice," she mumbled, almost begrudgingly. Teresa set down a basket of finished hats. "Thank you," she replied gently. "We're grateful the board approved it." Brenda inhaled sharply, as if to say something else. Then, with a curt nod, she turned and walked away. Despite the frosty exchange, Teresa sensed a subtle shift. Perhaps Brenda realized the lounge corner wasn't an eyesore, but a testament to community spirit, something even she might grudgingly admire. Reports circulated that Brenda had stepped down from other committees as well and kept mostly to herself. Some neighbors said she'd mellowed slightly, possibly reflecting on the consequences of her outburst. Whatever the reason, Oakleaf Terraces rarely saw her brandishing a clipboard or harassing anyone about minor infractions anymore. For the seniors, the best approach was to let sleeping dogs lie. They had their space, their project, and the unwavering support of those around them. Dwelling on Brenda's grudges served no purpose. The circle was determined to move forward, stitch by stitch, creating something beautiful out of once spilled ink. As months passed, the lounge corner blossomed into a treasured hub. The senior knitters and crafters corner had a rotating cast of participants. Some seniors drifted in for a few weeks to finish a personal project. Others became fixtures, showing up daily with a thermos of tea. A new wave of novices arrived, drawn by a curiosity for yarn arts. They found patient mentors in Teresa, Millie, and the longtime members. One highlight was the introduction of a Knit with Kids hour every Saturday morning. Grandchildren, neighbors' children, or even local kids would drop by, learning basics like casting on, single crochet, or how to finger knit a short cord. The squeals of delight from a 7-year-old discovering they could create a tiny scarf for a doll illuminated the lounge with joy. The older residents thrived on passing down their knowledge. For them, each younger learner was a chance to share not just stitches but stories about life decades ago, about perseverance, about how small tasks teach bigger lessons of patience and creativity. The lounge corner became a metaphorical fireside, bridging generations in a building once overshadowed by petty rule enforcement. Many residents credited the shift to the meltdown that forced the knitters out of the corridor. "If not for Brenda's meltdown," joked Ms. Peterson, "we might never have gotten this wonderful communal space." People marveled at the irony. An act of vandalism had inadvertently paved the way for a better, more robust arrangement. Seasons rolled on at Oakleaf Terraces. The once stark lounge now gleamed with color, a testament to how adversity can trigger transformation. Visitors marveled at the well-stocked yarn cabinet, the comfy chairs, the pinned-up patterns on a bulletin board, and always the steady sound of needles clicking, of voices sharing friendly banter, filled the air. Brenda Arnett remained in the building, albeit a quieter presence. She paid her HOA dues, stayed out of leadership roles, and seldom engaged in confrontation. Occasionally, residents saw her walking her small dog in the courtyard, eyes avoiding the lounge corner. For all her prior antagonism, she seemed to accept that the building had moved on from her brand of authoritarian oversight. As for the seniors, they knitted on, forming a tapestry of resilience that wove into Oakleaf Terrace's very identity. They donated hats and blankets, taught novices, and displayed finished pieces on a small stand for anyone to admire or purchase, with proceeds going to a local charity. The circle's membership evolved as newcomers joined, Some old faces moved away, and fresh friendships blossomed. Yet the spirit remained the same, a welcoming place to craft, laugh, and support each other in life's challenges. In quiet moments, Teresa sometimes reflected on that fateful day when ink rained down on their yarn, threatening to ruin everything they loved. She remembered the heartbreak, the sense of violation. But she also remembered the wave of compassion that followed, the neighbors who rose to defend them, the board's eventual stand for justice. She realized that a single cruel act could not extinguish the warmth of a tight-knit community. If anything, it kindled an even brighter flame of solidarity. And so, with each cast-on stitch and bound-off edge, the seniors celebrated life's capacity to turn darkness into light, one piece of yarn at a time. What began as an act of malice had become a story of redemption, proving that in the face of hostility, creativity and kindness could triumph, leaving a legacy of warmth in every hallway, lounge corner, and heart that experienced it.